Good morning. This is the Weather Insights briefing. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. We are still looking at Tropical Storm Helene, but Jeff, I expect maybe even the next update, Helene could be a hurricane now with winds at 70 miles per hour. Convection looking much more impressive than it has the last few days, going through the Yucatan Channel right now. Cancun getting pounded with rain and tropical storm force winds, high tropical storm force winds. And that convection really starting to take shape now, north and northeast of the eye that is forming there. So parts of Florida, Cuba, all getting convection this morning, and some pretty good squalls going over the western side of Cuba right there. So Helene definitely verifying to what the models are showing. We're showing the last few days. We'll see how strong it actually gets, but it is definitely moving into a more favorable environment and getting out of that sheared environment that was giving it some trouble to develop. And of course, we have lots of watches and warnings, not just for Florida, but starting down in Mexico. We still have the hurricane warning for the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula and down the coast, some tropical storm, a small tropical storm warning area to the west of that. Tropical storm warnings for near Havana to the tip of Cuba. In Florida, I think just about every county except for the peninsula there is under some sort of tropical storm warning, hurricane warning, of course, for the Big Bend area. And then now we're seeing tropical storm watches as far north as South Carolina, southern Georgia. Jeff, this thing is going to be a large storm.
Yep, and this is this is going to be the legacy of this is the inland extent of and we're going to see watches and warnings extend inland probably much further than this, possibly all the way up to Metro Atlanta for tropical storm conditions as we get in a little bit later. But really no change in the forecast track. I think if you're looking at forecast certainty and stuff like that, this is a relatively high confidence forecast track. Could there be little wobbles? Yeah, there could be, but for the most part we've seen very little variation. This is the last 4 or 5 runs of the average of all of the models, and you can see there's just been very little deviation in this forecast track. Very well defined steering flow, and so once that steering flow is well defined like this, once we have the center like we have now, there's likely not going to be any big changes to the forecast track here. So this adds a lot of confidence. Big Bend to Florida, Metro Tallahassee, you're right in the crosshairs of this. This is going to come up towards you. It's going to come fast. Today's the last day for preparations in the Florida Big Bend area. Things are going to go downhill relatively quickly as we get into tomorrow. On the intensity side of things, I think this is probably a little bit on the low side. Just what we're seeing this morning of how it's coming
Right.
together down in the Yucatan Channel area.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see this probably easily become a major hurricane, a Category 3. A lot of our hurricane intensity models do bring this to a Category 4 hurricane. It certainly wouldn't surprise me at all if we're dealing with a Category 4 hurricane. And so that's what you need to be planning for in that Florida Big Bend area, roughly, Tallahassee, Apalachicola, over towards Perry, Florida, Ocala, those areas, Gainesville, and then even down the peninsula, as you mentioned, Tampa. You're not in the hurricane warning, but you are in the tropical storm warning. And so you are going to see 50, 60 mile an hour winds in the metro Tampa, St. Petersburg area, and potentially tropical storm force winds over much of the Florida peninsula, even over on the East Coast, Jacksonville, Orlando, all the way down potentially towards West Palm Beach and some of those squalls. And then, like we've mentioned, extending very far inland along the track. And so, this is the sustained tropical storm force wind probability. And as you can see here, very high probability way up here into south central Georgia. We're talking Waycross, Valdosta, 60, 70, 80% chances of sustained 40-mile-an-hour winds. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we have sustained hurricane force winds well up here into southern Georgia. And so this is very similar to what we saw with Hurricane Michael back in 2018, an accelerating strong hurricane coming inland that's going to bring these winds way, way inland here. And look at these chances up here in northern Georgia, Atlanta metro. You're talking a
Incredible.
40 and 50% chance
Yeah.
of sustained tropical storm force winds. And so we're talking potentially 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds extending hundreds of miles inland. Hurricane force winds extending 100 miles inland, maybe even more in the southeast United States. So this is going to be a big impact. It's going to be a big impact, not just where the center comes in, but well away from the center. Again, much of the peninsula of Florida, much of the entire state of Georgia, and then getting up here into the Carolinas and eastern Tennessee. Again, you have the southern Appalachians that come down here, you have higher terrain. So it wouldn't be totally surprising if we see 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds up here in some of this higher terrain of the southern Appalachians back down into northern Georgia. So this is going to be a big impact, significant disruption of travel in the southeast United States starting tomorrow, probably going all the way into Saturday and Sunday, just depending on how big these impacts are up here. Of course, we'll talk more about this probably this afternoon. I think
Yeah.
we were kind of hinting at maybe doing a live, I don't know, whatever, live YouTube or
Stream.
something
Yep. Hmm.
stream this afternoon,
Yeah.
and we can really get into some of the details here in the Florida Panhandle and
Yeah.
the Big Bend here on the surge. But so far, holding at that 10 to 15 feet, it wouldn't surprise me if this went up maybe a little bit here in some of these areas as that confidence
Hmm.
increases, and especially if we get a little bit of a stronger hurricane. But this hasn't changed a whole lot. So we're still talking
Yeah.
5 to 8 in Tampa Bay, Clearwater. Again, if you're talking 8 feet above ground level, that's over your head in some cases. So this could be fairly significant impact down here in the Tampa Bay area. Again, the center passing well out here to the west, but it's that big wind field and that onshore push. So it's when the center comes up here to the north, you get those southwesterly winds coming here to the west coast of Florida. That's going to push that Gulf of Mexico water toward the coast. And so you're going to get that water level rise here. Really, I think it's going to be tomorrow night. Thursday night is the high tide after midnight, about 1:40 in the morning, Friday morning is probably where you're going to see the maximum here around the Tampa Bay Clearwater area. And then late Thursday night into Friday morning here in the Big Bend, the eastern portion of the Big Bend. So you're talking Cedar Key, Horseshoe Beach, some of these areas. There's not a lot of population up in this area, but there are some towns, and these towns are going to really take it on the chin this time. I want to be clear: this is not Adelia, this is not Debbie. This potentially is going to be a record storm surge for the portions here of the Florida Big Bend. I know this area has been through some hurricanes recently. Do not make your decisions on this storm based on what has happened recently. This is
Right.
not those storms. This is going to be a much more significant storm surge event here for the eastern portion of the Florida Big Bend. And we can get into a little bit more of this later, showing the inundation mapping up in here. We have a little more time. And then the other thing we've kind of been talking about, the rain comes in, you're gonna get the heavy rain along the track, but it's as the remnants or the actual the circulation of itself kind of moves north here into northern Georgia, the western Carolinas, eastern Tennessee, and it runs up against the mountains, the southern Appalachians, and also a front laying here. We're gonna get some big rains. So inland flash flooding, inland flooding from metro Atlanta up through the western portions of the Carolinas is going to be a really big deal. We're talking double-digit rainfall totals, easily potentially a foot.
Yep.
Maybe wouldn't be surprised if somebody gets 2 feet of rain up here in
20
western
inches.
North
Yeah.
Carolina, and that's just going to be absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
When that with that higher terrain and the flash flooding that can happen with the creeks and the rivers up in this area. So, well, again, I keep stressing this: well inland, well away from the center. Big impacts here across the southeast United States. Really, the impact starting later today in Florida from the Keys and then working their way up. Today's the last day for preparations. I know we've got a lot of mandatory evacuations that
Yep.
are already in place. We got some more that are going to be coming today. You really need to heed those evacuation recommendations for your local officials. This is going to be a serious hurricane event
Yeah.
for portions of Florida.
Yeah. For the first time yesterday, now we're seeing just east of Chattanooga and south of Knoxville, those pockets of a foot or more. But like you said, Jeff, this is the kind of storm that you can get 20 plus inches of rain, and be interesting to see how the models adjust. But either way, that's a ton of rain. And like you said, life threatening storm surges. This is a serious storm. So you mentioned streaming live. We'll try to do that around 7 Central. we do encourage your questions too. That's one of the reasons we want to stream live. So be sure to tune in for that. Weather Insights YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed and enable those notifications. And we'll see you this evening. Jeff, thank you very much.